our first episode of Winning with Kids. I'm your host, JR Shoemate. The first thing I want to do is throw out some thank yous. About a month or two ago, I had talked to Jeff Ferguson about the desire to do a podcast. And in that time, he has made it happen. And I got Sean Williams here with me tonight. The guy just works, knows what he's doing, making things happen. So shout out to both those guys. Really appreciate it. The other thing I want to do is I want to thank what I would call my basketball family, all the coaches, all the kids, all the parents, the teammates that I've had over the years. One of the things that I'm really going to try to draw on here in this show will be my experiences. 31 years as a coach, 25 years in education, 15 of those I spent teaching, 10 I spent as administrator, and then of course I got 7 great kids. So I'm going to draw on those experiences. I also want to draw on other coaches. So at some point we'll have some guests in. Want to take current events and talk about those. Want to take things that have happened in the past, history, facts, research, and really spend a lot of time talking about the things that are pertinent to youth sports. The two topics that we will talk about every week will be amateur athletics and competition. As we know in amateur athletics right now, the lines are being blurred. We got realignment going on in college. We got the NIL that's turning amateur sports really upside down. We've never really thought in these terms of paying college players the amount of money that they're getting paid now. But take a look at Luka Doncic, who signed his first contract at 13 with Real Madrid. That was a 5-year contract. He signed it when he was 13. And right after that, that's when he came over and signed his NBA contract. So this stuff has been going on for a long time. It's just different for us here in the United States. And we obviously want to talk about those things, and those things will come up. Competition. We have youth sports here in this country. We have middle school sports. We have high school sports, college sports, club sports, and we'll also reference professional sport as we go through it. Tonight, I really want to highlight 3 coaches and 3 businesses. Then I want to talk about some of the things that I did as a coach to really drive home some concepts I think are really important. You got Steve Kerr, that's the coach of the Warriors that we're going to talk about, reference him some. Gino Auriemma, who's the great at UConn, still rolling out dubs there. And then you got Nick Saban, who we're really going to highlight tonight. He just retired a few weeks ago. One of the coaches that I really look up to, one of the greats in college football, if not the best that's ever done it. We're going to reference him some tonight. For those Ohio State fans out there, those Ohio State football fans, don't get too upset. This is just one night where we're going to talk a lot about Nick Saban. Ryan Day, obviously a great coach in his own right, but with Nick Saban retiring, I really wanted to use a lot of his clips and quotes tonight. So he said amateur athletics gonna really be something we hit on a lot. Competition, but with those two things, it's important to keep in mind the balance between development and competition. Whether you're the parent of a 7-year-old who's looking for a youth program to get into, or you're the parent of a senior in high school. I've been both. And what you want is you want development. You also want competition. You want your kid to get better. You want their skills to expand, and that's difficult to do while you're competing. So you got to make sure that you have a good balance of both. And one of the things that I'll reference right now of Nick Saban, this past year, I think it was well documented. It was all over TV. His starting quarterback struggled early in the year, and one of the scenes that you see when Milrose is walking off the field is Nick Saban doing one of his typical rants in, trying to drive home a point to the young guy, and that I had no problem with that. The guy's a college athlete, wants to be a pro. Had no issue whatsoever with it. But if you turn that and say, okay, we're talking about youth sports, and 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 year old, obviously you're not going to come with that kind of intensity at a kid that young. The other side of that coin is a lack of instruction, a lack of enthusiasm. And that's what I see more. I don't see those cringy moments in youth sports, in high school sports, in middle school. There are some, but I don't see those as much. What I see is a lack of instruction, a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of competence more so than the cringy moments. Coaches not taking control of the fourth grade team and giving the kids enough instruction, proper instruction, developmentally appropriate instruction. So those are we have to amateur athletics, competition, but always thinking about that balance between development and competition. Before we go into talking about some of these coaches that I want to highlight tonight, I want to talk about the difference between teaching and coaching because it's something that I'll allude to as I'm going through tonight's episode and episodes to continue. Teaching for me, when I talk to my staffs about teaching, that's when you're talking about a kid's form. You're talking about getting their shooting hand through the ball, getting good backspin. You're talking about not getting the left thumb involved and getting side spin. You're talking about how to set up and use a fade screen. You're talking about the different reads coming off of a pin down screen. That's teaching. Coaching is when you've got a kid who's not giving you the effort that you think they're capable of. They're you know they're really good players, but they're maybe not getting in a stance on defense, maybe not defending something with the intensity that you want them to. Coaching is trying to get more out. That's what Coach Saban was doing with Milrose, trying to get him to heighten his concentration, trying to get him to play with more enthusiasm, more toughness, more energy. So we've got to discern between teaching and coaching. In the classroom, part of my job now is to go into classrooms and reflect with teachers on their teaching and what they like about the lesson, what they didn't like about the lesson, and something we talk about a lot is that control versus support matrix. So you got to have control of your classroom, right? But you also have to give the students support. Too much control, not enough support, just leads to kids being robots. We've got to let them be them, um, but we've also got to have the control where we're taking the kids somewhere and they're not taking us somewhere. So as we move along here and we start to talk about Steve Kerr, I think the first thing I want to point out about Steve Kerr is I think he coaches during games less than the other two coaches we're going to talk about, Gino Auriemma and Nick Saban. I feel like you'll see a lot of emotion from them on the sidelines. And why do you see that emotion? Is it because they're just crazy? They don't have any self control? I don't think so. I think it's because they're trying to get more out of their players. They're trying to show the emotion that they want to see. And I think there's a good reason why Steve Kerr, as a pro coach, isn't showing as much emotion because he's dealing with professional athletes. He's dealing with grown men. So you see less emotion. If you see emotion out of Steve Kerr, it's usually towards officials. It's not towards his players. And the reason that we talk about these three guys because they're great leaders. Leadership, as we know, in every organization matters. It's the most important thing. We look to our leaders to set the example. We look them to set the expectation and the standard. And I think these three guys exemplify that really well. And when I was researching who to talk about, the Warriors have been to 6 of the last 10 NBA finals. That's the best of any team in the NBA. UConn women basketball, they've been to 9 of the last 10 Final Fours. Alabama football, they've been to 8 of 10 CFPs. So these guys, not only sound competent, the results are there without any question. So when we talk about leadership, there are 4 elements of leadership that I really, really want to dive into And the first one being expectations and standards. There's a video of Nick Saban talking about the choices that you have in terms of standard, and he talks about bad, average, good, excellent, and elite, right? And obviously with Saban for years, they've been excellent or they've been elite. A really good example. Gino Auriemma had a good quote, one that we used on the back of our T-shirts when I was coaching at Newark more than once. But Gino once said, "With the absence of pressure, it's very hard to do great things," and I believe that's true. I think that you have to weave pressure, urgency into each practice, into each class. Without that, we're not able to get over obstacles, which helps our self-esteem, which helps our self-confidence, which moves us forward. So you can't wait until game night for the kids to feel pressure. It's got to be each and every day in practice, and that's part of your standards and your expectations. The other quote that is out there that Nick Saban is really famous for was, "High achievers do not like mediocre people, and mediocre people don't like high achievers." And we'll show you a clip of that as well.
Mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. So if everybody doesn't buy into the same principles and values of the organization and the same high standard, you're never going to be successful.
Nick is exactly right. It's hard to have high standards in any organization. I don't care if you're ringing people out at Kroger. If your line is right beside someone else's and they're running 2 people through in a half an hour and you're running through 6, it just creates a little animosity within the workplace. We've got to have an expectation as a store of, we're gonna move people through this line, and we're gonna have an expectation that we do it fairly quickly and efficiently. And you can see easily how that happens in sport and in business when the idea is competition, right? We want to get better, we want to grow, we want to be competitive. The other thing that you saw with Nick Saban in a national championship game the year he had Jalen Hurts is in the second half of a game, and this speaks to expectations and standards. Jalen Hurts had started the whole year. Jalen Hurts was a great quarterback. Jalen Hurts was up for MVP this year in the NFL. And in the second half of a national championship game, he pulled Jalen Hurts.
Tua Tagovailoa, a true freshman from Hawaii, gets the second half start. He keeps it.
For Tua. And Tua goes in and throws the winning touchdowns.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown!
So those are just a few examples of how Gino Auriemma, Nick Saban create those standards at Alabama and at UConn. And there's so many more, but I thought those were really good examples. The other principle, aside from expectation and standards, and again, we're going to outline 4. There are many. We're going to outline 4. Accountability and recognition. So once you have set your expectations for whatever you want your business to look like, whatever you want your team to look like, you've got to have an accountability system. You've got to have a recognition system. And again, to reference Nick Saban, and this was again after a college football playoff game, Saban in the post-game news conference, you always try to protect your players. Like you're with these guys so much, you put in so much work, and then you got these reporters coming in and asking all these questions and questioning their effort, questioning their playmaking. Well, at the end of the press conference, I think Saban was a little fed up with it, and he told the guys to sit back down and then just blanketed them with praise for the work that they've done through the year. Mentioned that we wouldn't have been here without these guys.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
These 2 guys that are sitting up here, they're not defined by one game. These guys played great for us all year. They're great competitors. They were great leaders on this team, and they contributed tremendously to the success of this team, and we would not be here without them.
But that's an example of qualitative praise, qualitative recognition, subjective recognition, and then we also have from coaches, we have that quantitative recognition, the objective stuff. How many tackles did you get during the game? Ohio State gives their players Buckeyes to put on their helmets. Most great programs have a recognition system where after games, when you come in the locker room, sure they may give a game ball to somebody, and again that would be subjective, but you're going to talk about receptions, you're going to talk about running yards, and you're going to award people after each game for their efforts and their accomplishments. And then, the third thing would be innovation and collaboration. So if you're not staying on the cutting edge of what you're doing in sport or in business, it'll leave you behind, especially in a day and age when we have so much technology, right? Things are changing. AI is probably the biggest example of that right now. And I think we'll go to Steve Kerr for the example of innovation and collaboration. He's coached, he's played with, he's played under a lot of great coaches. Greg Popovich, Phil Jackson, played with Michael Jordan. Actually, I think he got punched by Michael Jordan once. But here's a guy who has collaborated with some of the greats. Like, he's brushed with greatness. His dad was a professor, a guy who really understands how to innovate and work with other people. And one example of that was just small ball. I mean, there hasn't been a team over the last 10 years shoot as many threes. Now, the rest of the league is catching up with that. Now the analytics say you're either going to shoot a three or you're going to get a layup. But Steve Kerr was looking at that long before anybody else was in the NBA. I don't think I ever saw a shooting guard, and Steph Curry obviously is the ultimate shooting guard. I had never seen a guy penetrate the lane line, kick the ball, and then come off a pin down screen as quickly and as scripted as what the Warriors do. I mean, their offense really flows out of their transition, and their offense is it's just very free flowing. There's a lot of creativity that goes on within their offense. One example of that is Draymond Green. Now, Draymond Green is not a great shooter. I don't think he's a great ball handler, but he's a great facilitator. And now you're seeing so many more bigs in the NBA as facilitators. So Steve Kerr, in a lot of ways, in the NBA, has been really a great innovator. One of his quotes, one of his famous quotes, is, "The future is coming so fast we cannot possibly predict it. We can learn to respond to it quickly, though." Another really good example of innovation and collaboration, and again, going to go back to Nick Saban, is his offensive coordinators. So Saban has had he's had 5 really good offensive coordinators, but I think he's had 10 or 12 during his 15 or 20 years at Alabama. So here's a guy who, he gets stolen from a lot. People come and they take people off his staff because they want to know what that Saban magic is. And we'll talk about what my idea of that Saban magic is, and what great coaches do, what great leaders do, that people are trying to figure out. I don't know if we'll get to that tonight, but I really feel like Saban did such a good job of being able to put together a staff each and every year, even though he was getting them plucked over and over again. I mean, you got O'Brien now, who's with OSU. You got Sark, who's the head coach at Texas. You got Kiffin, who's the head coach at Ole Miss. You've got Loxley, who's the head coach of the Terps, and then you got Dable, who's the head coach of the Giants. So here's a guy who lost, obviously great coaches each and every year, but he was able to innovate, collaborate, change with the times, always been a defensive coach, but he always found great offensive guys to plug into the system and just get results each and every year. And the last thing, so we've talked about expectations and standards. We've talked about an accountability system, a recognition system to hold people to those expectations and standards. We've talked about innovation and collaboration. You don't know everything. You can't know everything. You got to have great partners. You got to have great colleagues. But something that I think is at the base of this whole thing and something that's got to hold it all together are principles and intangibles. And I also call that encouraging the heart. I know that's a long explanation, but principles, intangibles, encouraging the heart every day. And, something, again, going back to Saban, we've got a video of a great conversation he had with a member of the press where he's talking about and but.
I tell our players all the time, the two most compelling words in the draft report is and but. All right, so they read the player, and I'll take a defensive back. All right, he's got quick feet, change of direction, good long speed, can play man to man. He's a good tackler. He's got toughness. He's got really good ball judgment and really good ball skills. And he's a good person. He was a leader on the team. He graduated from school. Coaches loved him. Read the same player, but he had a positive drug test. He had a domestic violence incident with his girlfriend, got in a fight in a bar when he was a freshman.
So, he talked about all the physical skills, all of the all the skills the guy has on the field, everything he can do as a player. But, what did he do off the field that was bad? Now, if you can throw an and in there, then you're feeling pretty good. But there's always a sense of, people have to come first. And whenever I think it's most important when you're just starting a program, because a lot of people want to chase talent when in fact talent is really, really important. But the principles have to be in place. You've got to have kids that um, have that sense of team, and the only way to do that is if we have common principles and those intangible qualities in place first. So now let's switch gears to some businesses, right? So just to further illustrate what I was talking about with those four keys to a winning organization. The other place we see competition in our society is we see it through our businesses, and there's one in particular that our family loves, and we can't get it here near where we live. It's Chick-fil-A.
I'm originally from Hawaii, but I moved to Wisconsin just last year. I decided to get a bike because a car was too expensive. We both work at Chick-fil-A.
She would bike to work every day.
And then winter hit, and that was pretty rough. So there was a holiday raffle, and they were giving away a car there. Her name got called.
And I was like,
She decided to give the car to me. Chick-fil-A feels like one big family.
helping you or just like any of my coworkers always brings joy. It's crazy to say like I gave my best friend a car.
Right. So whenever we go on the road, we're looking for a Chick-fil-A and always disappointed when we think of it and it's a Sunday, right? But Chick-fil-A is, they're obviously principled. If you just watch their commercials, you'll know that. We have a clip of one of the Chick-fil-A commercials in case you haven't seen them, but they do a great job of recognizing their employees during their commercials. They do a great job of recognizing their customers during their commercials. You talk about innovation. Where else do you see iPads when you're ordering? Where else do you see heaters so there can be people outside and still be comfortable? Where else do you see that assembly line approach to taking orders, so that even if the line, you can pull up to a Chick-fil-A, and even if the line's out to the road, hey, I'm through here. I'm getting through here in 5 minutes, and you can rest assured that's going to happen. And as far as expectations and accountability and recognition, all you have to do is go there once, and it really doesn't matter. It's a standard across the board. I've never been to one that I didn't feel like there was quality control. I know what I'm going to get when I go there. The food's going to be good. It's going to be what I expect. The people are going to be really, really accommodating, polite. And when you walk in, you can see the recognition. You can see the faces hanging on the wall of the people that are the employees of the month, employees of the year, employees of the day. So they do a great job of those four things that I was just talking about in athletics. The other example, and I think this drives home the point more than anything, you can't be bad at anything as a company, right? Or as a team. So just take a football team. If you're a football team and your offensive line is the worst in the league, you're not going to beat anybody. Same thing with your special teams. If your special teams are the worst, you're not going to win championships. You can't be bad at anything. And I think Amazon is such a great example of that because they do so much, right? They're into streaming, they're into shipping, they're into sports now. Think about who their competitors are. Their competitors are Fox, CBS, NBC, FedEx, UPS, other streaming services, grocery stores, because they also bought Whole Foods. I mean, Amazon does a lot. And from what I've experienced, they're not bad at anything. And they're excellent at some things, right? And I think that's the key, to a great family, to a great business, to a great sports team is you've got to pay attention to everything. And this hits on a little bit what I'm talking about with that Saban magic or that Gino Auriemma magic or that Don Staley magic, whoever you want to talk about, who's great in their industry right now. It isn't one thing that makes them great, right? It's that they're good at everything, but they have some exceptional strengths. And I think Amazon really exemplifies that well, not only because, that's who they are, but they do so much. They're into so much. And then I want to shout out to a local business that, I'm unique here in my situation where I live. I have a well. I'm not on city water. And when we have an issue with water, I can't call the city and tell them I've got to rely on an independent company. And I didn't find this company until about 4 or 5 years ago. And that's been longer than that now. It might have been 6 or 7, but it's called Mount Drilling and it's out of Licking County. And I'm telling you, this company is excellent at all the things I just talked about. They come into your home and you feel like you've invited family in. I just had an issue. We've had some freezing temperatures here in Ohio, as we do. I love the weather here, and I had a water line bust, but I didn't know it because there was nothing in my house. It was out in my garage. We've got a bathroom and a kitchenette out there, and it's detached, so I didn't even think to go out there. Well, I went out there at 10 o'clock at night, and sure enough, there's water everywhere. Well, I called Mount Drilling. Obviously, they're not open. I leave a message. By 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting a phone call, and then they're here at my house before noon. And I knew how busy they would be, but they always find time, and they're always excellent at what they do. And again, just another example of a great company, but a local one that probably not many people know about. But if you have a well, Mount Drilling is the way to go. So the next thing I want to do is I want to move into a chalk talk, right? I want to do this every episode. I want to illustrate something on the board. And as a coach, and when I was 25 years old, I think I might have been 24, I took over a job in West Lafayette, and we weren't very good, right? I mean, all of my players were football players, and the football team was 1-9 and 0-10 the 2 years I was there. And every kid I had was essentially a football player, except for one kid, Chad Ollinger. Shout out to Chad Ollinger. Great guy, great kid, great basketball player. Really kept me sane while I was at Ridgewood over in West Lafayette. But the one thing that you try to do when you go into a situation like that, or a new business, a new undertaking, is, it's like anybody else, control the controllables. What do you know that your kids can do and that they can do well? And the Chalk Talk tonight is really going to drive home one thing that I think that every team, regardless of whether it's a first year team or it's a team that you've coached for 20 years, you can be good at, right? You can be good at this concept, and that concept is conversions, right? So when you go from offense to defense and from defense to offense, that is a time where you can really make some hay if you work on that. And a lot of people would call that a moment in time that's not organized, right? But I think you've got to get organized in those moments. And I hope that I will illustrate why you have to be really good in those moments with the diagram, with the chalk talk that we're going to have. But the hope is, when you're converting really well to defense, is that you're creating those principles of dictating to the other team what they're going to do, a relentless kind of pressure. Whether it's offense, we're going to get it down the floor quickly. You're not going to be able to lose concentration because we're coming back at you as quickly as you just scored. We're coming back down the floor. And again, I think it creates an aggressive mindset. We want to make sure that in anything we're doing, I always told our kids that if we're playing Monopoly, we're going to buy every property we land on, right? I mean, we're going to be the aggressor in this game. And the aggressor normally is the one who comes out on top. So the concept in defensive conversion, and that's what we're going to focus on tonight. We're not going to focus on offensive conversion. That's for another night. But tonight we're going to focus on defensive conversion. And the thought there is control, right? So we make a basket. Okay, ball goes in. What is our responsibility as soon as that happens? And if we all know, then we're going to be able to do one of two things. We're either going to be able to control the other team, or we're going to be able to speed them up, whatever we want to do. And we might be able to control them, then speed them up. We might be able to control them and then intermittently speed them up, but we've got to control them first. So in order to do that, we've got to be quick in our conversion, okay? And there are a few concepts that I want to use the board to diagram that, and I'm going to move to the board right now. So when you are an offensive player, is this a good view of the mic of the board? Okay, so when you're an offensive player, what you want to do after the other team has shot the ball, whether it's a make or a miss, if you convert quickly to offense, see, we're going this way on offense. We would really like to throw the ball out here with the guard moving this direction so we have a head start moving down the floor, right? We want to get and we want to go. Now, we're going to talk about how to mitigate against that in a minute, but if you can't do that, then what you teach your guards to do is to make a second cut. You can't do this in banana cut. So again, you're catching the ball heading down the floor. So we did talk a little bit of offensive conversion there in order to illustrate the points that I'm getting ready to talk about. So if I'm a really good defensive coach and we're working really hard on defensive conversion, one of the things that we like to do is jam the other team up. So we don't want the two things I just talked about. We don't want that to happen for the other team. We don't want them catching it with a head of steam heading towards their basket. So we're going to use a concept we call tailing. Okay. So whenever a person is standing here, we want to be between them and the other basket, forcing them to come back this direction to get the ball. So we're tailing. You can also call that jamming them up. And the reason when we use the terms jamming them up, the last game I ever coached in high school, we played against KK Branson and Layla Fila. KK Branson is at Notre Dame. She's one of their best players. Layla Fila is the best player on Michigan's team, in my opinion. She might be one of the top 5 in the Big Ten period. But we played against both those kids in the state final in 21, and both great players. So whenever the ball came off the rim, we converted a kid to them. So we had guards that were significantly smaller that were guarding them, and I won't mention their names now. But we had guards that were significantly smaller who went to Division II schools, but they're really quick kids, they're really aggressive kids, and they're really tough kids, right? So when the ball came off the rim, it wasn't their job to get the ball. If KK Branson got the ball right here, it was their job to be here and not let her get ahead of steam down court. Because if she did, it was going to be a lot like LeBron coming downhill, relatively speaking. Wasn't going to work real well for us. So we needed to make sure she didn't get ahead of steam going down the court, right? But we also, once we jammed her up, and you'll see some of this on what we're going to do at the end to illustrate it with some video. You'll see what I'm talking about. It'll be with a different player, but I'll talk about her in a minute. So we jammed up to make sure. Or if Layla Fila was over here, ball came off the rim, or they're outletting to her, we made sure we had some in there. So we took 2 of our guards that normally go to the boards and said, you aren't going to the boards. Now, if the rebound comes to you or it's close, you're going to go get it, obviously. But you're going to convert to those 2 girls to make sure they don't get ahead of steam going downhill. So this is one of the benefits of really all year long and making it something that is just commonplace in your program to really work on conversions, because then you can make these minor tweaks for players that are outstanding and make sure they don't get downhill. We played against Zaya Cook, who's now playing in the WNBA. We played against JC Sheldon, and JC's not the athlete those other 3 kids I just mentioned, but if you put a ball in JC Sheldon's hands, she gets quicker, right? And That's no question. We didn't want JC getting downhill because she was such a good facilitator after she did that when she was in high school. The kid that you're going to see on film, her name is Bree Hall, and Bree Hall now plays at South Carolina. She's one of their best players. I think she just had a really good game last week. But we played, and you're going to see a clip of this. Okay, so we talked about tailing. We talked about jamming up. We also want to talk about levels. So we call this level 1. And in level 1, the ball's being taken out here. The other team's going this way. We want to tail in this level. So we just talked about it. They're here. We're gonna tail first. Now, just like on offense, we're gonna give them the ability to make plays. And if you've tailed and you're not getting beat down the court, we can work to here dictating sideline, or we can work all the way around, go make a play on the ball, right? Like a good DB would do in football. But we want to start out. The base is we're not getting beat over our head. We're not. You're going to tail and you're going to get contact. We call it getting connected. Make sure they feel you as you're tailing them. You're going to try to dictate where they go. So, and if we have somebody in the next level or the second level, then we're going to sit above them. We're going to be here. So anything, that is thrown over the head, any loose ball in here, we can go get it. So we're talking about first level, we're tailing. Second level, we're going to sit above in defensive conversion. If you're on the ball, you're on the logo, which most of the time the logo is right here. This is where we want you to be if you're guarding the ball. The reason you're here is because if the ball comes in here, you're right there to support any middle drive, right? I'm big on keeping the ball in the outer third of the floor most of the time. And I think if you know anything about basketball, why do people run a bunch of horn sets now? Because you throw the ball in the middle third. Why do most people that coach hoops, I don't care if it's college, pro, whatever it is, well, it's not pro because they don't really run traditional offense. But in high school and in college, the offense you see most is Princeton because you got a screener in here that can step out and get the ball. And again, the ball stays in the middle of the floor. So on defense, we don't want it to be in the middle of the floor. We want to get it out. That's the reason we've got a person here on the logo. So when the ball comes in, you've got support right away going to the middle of the floor. The other concepts are this. So the ball has come in. The ball is now in. It's right here. Got a person on the ball. Got a girl down the sideline. We say we got a girl opposite. We got a girl in the middle. They're going to clear out because we're playing man. But what I want to talk about is level of the ball, which is here. And we never want anybody in the full court above the level of the ball. So as I said, when the ball comes in, we're going to be sitting here below the level of the ball. We should have somebody sitting here, and sitting here. And we want to be on the line. And this would be the line of the ball. So if I'm guarding this person, no direct passes can be thrown. I only want passes to go over your head. So this is just initial positioning. When the ball comes in, we want to be tailing. We want to be on the logo. Second level, we want to be sitting above. And once the ball comes in, we always want to be below the level of the ball so we can support the ball. And if we want to go trap, the nice part about sitting above, if you ever want to go trap, you're closer to where you need to be in your rotation. If you're not sitting above your person and you're attached to them, you're not going to be able to do that. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of the lead-up drills that we do to this. So how do we make all this work? We've got a 7-second drill that we use. So you can have 3 people in a group, you can have 4 people in a group, but you got one person taking it out, you've got one person on offense, and you've got one person on defense. And you're working in this quadrant. So you're only in this quadrant. There are 3 more here, there are 3 more here, and 3 more here. And if you want to put 4, you got one person out, they can count. But it's called 7-second drill for a reason, because we're going to go for 7 seconds. That's longer than what you would in a game. Again, we're going back to, we want to put more pressure on you in practice than you're going to feel in the game. So we want to be able to maintain this positioning for 7 seconds. This offensive player is going to move around, try to get the ball. This defensive player is going to tail and try to stay connected. And when I say connected, I mean contact with this person, dictating where they're going, right? So I make sure I don't lose contact with them. And then at the 7-second mark, the ball is going to be thrown in to this player, and I just want to see this person in great position. And as the ball is coming in and the ball is caught, I want to see a body on that person and they're back to the basket. So we are the aggressor and we have the possibility of a bad pass, a bad catch, the ball gets thrown away. But I want to be aggressive here to make certain that this is a tough passing catch, and then we're in great defensive position when it comes in. The other thing that we do with 7 seconds, so we just rotate through there. You go from passer to offense to defense and just rotate through. But the other thing that we do, and the other position that we can be in, is we can face guard. So the ball's taken out here. We're going to face guard for 7 seconds. We would go through this twice. This person's going to move around. We're going to face. And in this situation, it's a little more aggressive. And we're telling kids, if you feel like you're getting beat, put a hand on them. Don't let them get by you. You cannot get beat across your face. We are not allowing this person to come to the ball and catch it. We're not. This is more aggressive. So whether we're throwing it on for a minute, I don't care if a foul's called. I don't care. Or if it's at the end of the game and we're trying to get back into it, if a foul's called, I mean, that's kind of how you got to go about it because you're down. So we are not letting this person cross our face. And then at 7 seconds, we're having this offensive player go deep and we're going to throw over their head. And then this person's going to run under and try to either get a deflection or be back in good defensive position. So that's what we call 7 second drill. And we use that to work on our positioning and our conversion. The next thing I'll talk about is really simple. So you can do it in open gym. You can do it in your 4-person workouts. You're either playing 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, just like you normally would, X's and O's. But when the ball goes in, if X's score, then the O's are taking it out underneath. And when the O's take it out underneath, you're working on conversion. The X's are getting to the logo and trying to make them catch it going back here. And if you want to get into some trapping or you want to get into some rotations, you can make the O's take the ball to half court before they can score. Most of the time, you just take it back past the 3-point line. But if you want to make it seem more like a full court drill, but you're staying in half court, getting more reps, getting more time on task, then you can just tell them, hey, you got to take it to half court. Then we're going to turn it around. We're going to come back this direction. But you're trying to make it as difficult as possible to get it to half court, right? Is the concept here. So that's a way you can work on conversion. You take one out of there because you got your 4-person workout, which I loved when they started doing that. I think it elevated everybody who would spend time at it. When you're going 2-on-2, it's the same thing, but now you just have one person to throw the ball into, and you can really isolate those kids and those skills. And then the last thing is just full court defensive workup. So we would have a coach take it out. We would be live. So we got an X and we have a defensive player, and we're just going to work on, this person can do whatever they want to get open. They throw it in, and we're going to make sure that we're connected. But then as soon as it comes in, our goal is to level the ball off and make sure we're maintaining control of it. So you'll see it on the film. So when you watch the clip, you'll see a really good guard of ours guarding Bree Hall when the ball comes in. It's a Huber Heights Wayne clip. And when Bree Hall gets the ball, now she's there on the catch, but she immediately backpedals because for the respect that she has for Bree Hall and her athleticism. But Bree Hall's going back towards the inbounder to get the ball, and you'll see that. So we just go down and back one-on-one. So these two people, when we get down here, we rotate defense to offense. Unless you're going against your scout team or your boys team that's coming in, then you'd be on defense all the time. And then you just add a person the next time. So the coach wouldn't need to take it out the next time. You would have a player take it out. You'd have somebody on the logo. You'd have a player here and then a player guarding them. And then you're 2-on-2. So it should get easier to guard the ball because you have support now, right? You have one more person on the floor that can support you. And I always saw that. I coached soccer when my kids were young. And 5v5 soccer, 6v6 soccer is much better than getting all those kids on the field because then it just becomes a cluster. So I always tell my players, numbers break doesn't just mean 4-on-3. It means 3-on-3 too. We love 3-on-3. If you can get downhill in a 3-on-3 situation, we want to go. And in some cases, 3-on-4 is okay. But the more court you have to work with, the more scramble situation that you can create, the better. So that's just 3 of the things we do to work up to our defensive conversion, some of the concepts that we use. And, we've got social media handles on the top of the screen here for people who want to, I love talking basketball. So if there are any questions, if anybody wants to talk about this further, please reach out to us on social media. I'll start checking that, a day or two after the episode goes on. But Would love to hear from you on social media. Follow us on Instagram, X, or Facebook. Okay, so getting back to those 4 components that we talked about, the first thing we did is we talked about Coach Kerr, Coach Oriema, Coach Saban, and how they drive these concepts home in their programs. And then we talked about some businesses and how they do it. I want to finish up here talking about how over my coaching career, how I did that at my stops as a head coach. And, that creating expectations and standards, so important, right? One of the things that we had is we had game goals. So we wanted to out rebound a team. We wanted the better turnover margin. We wanted to make more free throws than the other team attempted. We wanted more easy baskets, and we wanted a better shooting percentage at the end of the game. And we felt like if we did that, if we won 3 out of 5 of those, and it bared out over the course of my coaching career, if we won 3 out of 5 of those, we would most generally win the game. And I got those from a college coach at St. Louis who was a clinician. I saw him at the Nike clinic in Cleveland years and years ago, but it stuck with me, and it's something that we made a part of our program every year. The other thing is creating keys and objectives to each and every game. So early on in my career, at Newark, I'll talk specifically about Newark. We weren't we were the 5th best team in our league every year for the first 7 years I coached, because Gahanna was loaded, Pick North was loaded, Dave Butcher was there, Pick Central was loaded, and Reynoldsburg was loaded. So we knew going into the season, I knew we were going to lose 8 games that year. I knew it. We weren't going to beat them. So in those games, we created objectives. And before the year started, when we put all of our games up on the board, we put Newark versus Newark. We didn't even put Pick Central, Pick North, Reynoldsburg up there. We didn't even put them on the board. We put Newark versus Newark because we knew that, we weren't going to win that game. But could we go in and, be able to attain the objectives that we had for that game? And then, we identified the other, at the time we were playing 20 games. We identified the other 20 games that season. And most of those we could win, and we did win. Right. And we had keys to those games. What, who do we need to stop? What do we need to do on offense? What do we need on defense? How do we need to scheme this game? How do we need to approach it offensively and defensively to win this game? So I think there's a difference. Objectives, you're trying to get better, right? And keys, you're trying to win, right? We gotta make sure that we win this. And we made that distinction with our kids. Now later on, my last 7 years as a coach, 6 of those 7, we were nationally ranked. We weren't state ranked, we were nationally ranked. So we were really good. There weren't many teams on the schedule that we knew we were going to get really good competition from. So we would have maybe 8 to 10 of those a year, and we really had to look for those in order to find them. We played in as many of those invitationals as we possibly could to find the competition that we could, but it was difficult because you have to play your league games. And so those games, we did the same thing as we did with the teams that were really, loaded my first few years. We said, okay, we're not playing against such and such team. We're playing against Newark here. We have objectives for this game. We know we're going to win. We have objectives for it. And I think that's how you create standards and expectations for your kids, because, you're not going to talk about beating certain teams when you either know you can't or you're going to. You're going to win the game. It doesn't matter. We could roll the ball out. You're going to win. One thing we did in practice is that we had a broom set up. So we had a chair, we had a broom hanging off of it. There are 2 things that you absolutely cannot tolerate in basketball. One is turnovers, right? There's no tolerance for it, right? We can't throw the ball to the other team and expect to win. The other thing is missing layups. So, I always talked about it's like working all week and then not cashing the check, right? I mean, we're not going to throw a check in the trash. If we get a layup, we're going to cash it in. We're going to get it. So we did not tolerate layups being missed. We did not tolerate turnovers, and I didn't have to tell them. So after about halfway through year 1 or into year 2, the kids knew. I miss a layup during a drill, I just leave. Okay, and I get a sub in. I go over. I jump the broom 5 times. and then I could get back in. But just creating those expectations. The other thing we did is we made practice competitive, right? I mean, if it was a team drill, we kept track of what we did in that amount of time. So I mean, if we were doing a full court shooting drill as a team, and we had a minute to do it, we had an assistant coach that logged all that, and the next time we did it, we had to get that number or better. So our expectations was improvement, and to make sure that we really knew what the ceiling of all of our players was, knew the ceiling of what our team was. And I'm telling you, I talked to some coaches, and I get calls from coaches in the preseason, in the summer, talking about what we want to do, and so often they just don't know the ceiling of their players or the ceiling of their team. And if you don't know that, and take it a step further, you have to know how good the teams in your league are. You have to know who you can beat and who you can't, who you can realistically say, hey, I can compete with this team, and the teams that you're probably not going to get much competition from. And the last thing in terms of expectations is there were never walkthroughs, right? I mean, we didn't walk through. It was always pace, always competition to what we were doing. I mean, there might have been a game day when, there was something I didn't feel quite, that we understood defensively or offensively we wanted to do. So we might walk through that, but you can ask our players, even the day of a game, we were oftentimes full speed, just to set the tone. And, these are the expectations and standards that we have. And then in terms of accountability and recognition, I've already talked about some of that with the expectations. Accountability during practice. If you missed the layup, if you turned it over, you just went and jumped the broom. And that's something they did on their own, right? We didn't have to talk about it. We didn't have to say anything about it. We just knew that we weren't going to tolerate that. We had numbers in the log. So if it was an individual shooting drill we were doing, we had some great shooters over the years in Newark. I had a great shooter at Ridgewood, and Chad Olinger, I mentioned earlier. And, we would always log the numbers that they got, so that the next time we did that drill, they knew the number they had to beat. And if they didn't beat it, then, there was always a consequence for that. It might have been just an 11-second sprint, but it put some pressure on them. And oftentimes, as we got further into it, we didn't even have to have a consequence because the kids were trying so hard to beat those numbers. We also, in terms of recognition, so if you're asking kids to give their maximum effort every day, you're asking them to come in and be focused and concentrated all the time, you have to do something to recognize that when they do it. And after the games, we would have game awards, similar to what I talked about earlier with the Buckeyes and their Buckeyes on their helmet. We would have a spark, which was subjective. It was a qualitative award. Maybe it was a kid who came in a key moment and didn't even play, but maybe 5 or 10 minutes, but really turned things around for us, and did something great to change the momentum. Maybe it was a kid who had a overwhelming scoring night. Whatever it was, we always had a spark for each game. We had others that were obviously quantitative awards, objective awards, where and some that you may think are a little atypical. TTRs, we called them, to the rims. So if you got to the rim and shot a layup in the crease or over the front of the rim, even if you missed it, if you got to the rim, we called that a TTR, because oftentimes if you get to the rim, you've created help, you've created rebounding lanes, and we can go get it. KBTs, we call those kill box touches. So we really valued getting to the paint, and we felt like we would create help, and then we would get movement on the perimeter and get a lot of open shots or create closeouts where we could attack a second time. So we really valued getting to the kill box. We also valued defensively deflections. So those were things aside from rebounds and points and assists, which everybody charts, and we did too. And we gave awards for those, but our awards consisted of little beads. So we would have a clear container. We would give the kid either a basketball or a paw print, because we were the Wildcats. And at the end of the year, they would have a clear container full of those, and then they could make a bracelet or a necklace out of them. The other thing we did was blended drinks after a game. So we would do daiquiris. We would do the pina coladas. We would do milkshakes. you just had to celebrate the wins because you do work hard for them. And we wanted to make sure that every win felt like a celebration. When we went on the road, you always saw us bring a cooler in. We always had a cooler, and it had their favorite bottled drink in it. So after the game, we still had that feeling. We didn't bring the blender with us. We didn't bring the ice cream, but we brought bottled drinks that the kids could celebrate with after we went on the road. In terms of innovation, I just feel like offensively, I always had a great assistant that was always looking for new ideas. I think you get those ideas from watching the NBA. I think that if you want a new action, and I've been watching some European basketball here lately because my son's over there. I think they do a lot of really nice stuff offensively, but I wasn't a great offensive coach when I started. I think I'm much better now than when I started. I would probably coin myself in my 20s and 30s as a defensive coach, and I'm becoming more of an offensive coach now than I was then. But I'm always looking for new ways to create gaps for kids, to get screening actions for kids so we can get them an edge so they can get downhill or get open shots. Clinics, I loved going to clinics. Always went to the state clinic, always went to the Nike clinic. It was always something that I looked forward to every year and always took my staff to. And, it was time for us to get acquainted with one another and to also pick up some ideas. And oftentimes in those clinics, you don't get the best stuff from coaches. You don't. I mean, they come there, they tell stories, they cuss, and they make you laugh, and it's good stuff. But you get the best ideas by watching pro sports and college sports because that's when you see their best stuff. Like if you want a really good out under, well, watch when Duke's playing North Carolina and they're down by 3 and they need a 3 out under. Draw that one up, right? Because that's what you really want. And then in terms of principles and intangibles, everybody has pillars, whether you're a family, really good family, or, you're a school, any great sports team, they all have pillars that they really lean on at times where they can talk to kids. So ours were love, trust, and hard work. We really felt like those were the most important for us. And then as we went along, we threw in toughness there as well. We felt like we weren't as tough as we needed to be, probably about somewhere in the neighborhood of year 8 or 9 at Newark. I was there 13 years, and I felt like, one thing, it's difficult to get really good, but then it's even more difficult to stay really good because you just kind of lose some of that hunger. And you got kids in your program that haven't lost. Like by 2019, and we had a little dip there in 2019 where we didn't get to the state tournament. We got there in 15, we got there in 17, we got there in 20, we got there in 21. We didn't get there 18, 19. I felt like we had teams that could have, but I felt like that dip had something to do with just our kids had won so much. They just won so much, and I didn't do a good enough job of creating urgency to make sure we refocused every year. But we still had great teams. I just feel like you've got to have those principles in place that you can always go back to, right? The other things that we would do is we would use articles. We try not to overload them with that stuff, right? We picked out articles, or there were a couple years we did book studies, and it wasn't like we did 8 articles a year. And I didn't like quotes of the day. I like quotes of the month where, pick a good one, pick one that really is applicable to our team, and then make it kind of the bloodline of the team. We always did a hashtag too, which I think the kids love. If you got a theme going back in the year, some sort of hashtag, our kids really like that. The other thing you do to, just really encourage the heart with your team is go on trips, go on outings. I can remember paintballing in the fall with our teams. We'd go to a paintball course and they'd shoot me with paintballs, they'd shoot assistants, shoot each other. And I mean, they love that. We'd rent a movie theater and all of us go to the movie theater. They're just things that you do that pull your team closer together. And it's just like, it's just like a family. I mean, if you're constantly talking about business, things aren't going to go well. You got to love them up and really take that time to do it. So, hey, again, follow us on Instagram, follow us on X, follow us on Facebook. You can see it at the top of the screen. And Appreciate you checking out our first episode, and we'll look forward to episode 2. Thank you.